Welcome to Empathy Stories, a channel dedicated to heartfelt tales of understanding and personal growth. Today, we share a story that begins in luxury and privilege, then reveals the quiet power of kindness and humility. Stay with us as one man's life takes an unexpected turn toward compassion and change. It was an evening bathed in soft, golden light as Carter Reynolds stepped out of his sleek, navy blue sedan and into the gentle hum of the city. The Sterling Fork stood before him, a fine dining establishment renowned for its exquisite menu and its ability to shield its patrons from the ordinary world outside. Tall windows, sparkling chandeliers glimpsed through frosted glass, and uniformed staff who knew every regular by name. These were the hallmarks of a place where status and exclusivity thrived. Carter, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, approached the entrance with the measured gait of a man certain of his position in the world. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed and elegant. Muted conversations drifted through the warm glow of lamps and candlelight. Subtle classical music, faint and never overpowering, rose and fell like the rhythm of a distant tide. The maitre d', recognizing Carter on sight, welcomed him with a deferential bow and escorted him to his usual table near a window framed by heavy silk drapes. From this vantage point, Carter could survey the other diners, mostly familiar faces, financiers, lawyers, their spouses, and occasional guests. Here, surrounded by well-bred patrons, he felt entirely at ease, as if in a private club where entry was granted by wealth alone. He settled into his seat, smoothing the linen napkin over his lap, and allowed himself the small pleasure of a contented sigh. The world outside, the people rushing to catch a bus, the crowds waiting in line for simple meals, felt remote. He belonged here, among the genteel, where the cost of a single dish would make some shoppers blanch. With a gesture of his hand, he summoned a waiter and ordered a glass of the house's finest champagne. As he sipped, Carter noted with satisfaction the faint fizz against his palate, the subtle citrus notes, and the lingering finish that confirmed he was exactly where he was meant to be. Yet all this comfort and ease began to erode the moment another trio of diners entered. They were a black family, Daniel and Lauren Williams, along with their young son, Ethan, dressed smartly but not ostentatiously. The little boy looked around with wide, curious eyes, evidently delighted by the polished floors and glittering chandeliers. His parents guided him gently, smiling at him as the maitre d' showed them to a table not far from Carter's. Carter's gaze, which had been roaming lazily around the room, fixed upon them. He did not know them. He could not recall ever seeing them dine here before. Immediately, suspicion crept into his thoughts. He leaned forward slightly, his expression sharpening. They looked perfectly composed, at ease even, as they settled in and studied the menu. Lauren's dark hair was neatly styled, Daniel's posture calm and dignified, and Ethan seemed to be struggling to contain his excitement, though his parents kindly encouraged his sense of wonder without disturbing the quiet atmosphere. To Carter, however, their very presence felt like an intrusion. The Sterling Fork had always represented exclusivity, a place where people of a certain financial standing gathered. In his mind, this family did not fit. He assumed they must be straining their budget, or worse. He entertained the notion that they did not belong at all. He took another sip of champagne, but its pleasure was soured. He found himself distracted, glancing repeatedly at their table, searching for small signs that would confirm his suspicions. Were they handling the silverware awkwardly? Did they whisper over the prices? Shocked by them? He craned his neck slightly, straining to catch their conversation, but failing. The family's voices remained low and respectful, the gentle hum of their discussion interwoven with occasional laughter from the boy. Over the course of the next 20 minutes, Carter's annoyance intensified. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his finger on the tablecloth in irritation, unable to enjoy his fillet of sole as it arrived, beautifully plated. Instead, he muttered under his breath, occasionally loud enough that the diners at an adjacent table cast him uncertain glances. He made pointed comments to his waiter, snide remarks about how standards seemed to be slipping, How it was shocking whom they let in these days. The waiter, well-trained and discreet, tried to steer the conversation to wine pairings and dessert specials. But Carter would not be dissuaded. He spoke with thinly veiled contempt, loud enough for half the room to register his tone, if not his exact words. "Well, I suppose anyone can wander in now," he murmured, setting down his cutlery with more force than necessary. He eyed the Williams family, as though their very presence insulted him. The tension at nearby tables grew palpable. Some patrons exchanged sympathetic looks with the family. Others frowned at Carter's behavior, and a hush fell over conversations that had previously flowed so easily. And yet, despite the hostility radiating from Carter's corner, the Williams family remained composed. They savored their meal quietly, assisting Ethan with his napkin, commenting softly on the lovely ambience. If they noticed Carter's scowl, they gave no indication. It was this grace that most unsettled him. He found no flaw in their manners, no excuse to justify his rising indignation. He simply could not understand why they seemed so at home here, and that, more than anything else, disturbed him profoundly. As the evening wore on, Carter's discontent only seemed to swell within him, like a bitter draught he could not swallow. He had tried to lose himself in the taste of his steak and the aroma of his wine. Yet every bite turned bland on his tongue. The presence of the Williams family, so close by, their poised conversation and gentle smiles at their son, had become an intolerable distraction. He could not understand why they seemed utterly unperturbed. Worse still, the staff, his staff, as he liked to think of them, continued to attend to the family's table with the same courtesy and grace they afforded him. Carter muttered disparaging remarks beneath his breath, and on occasion, he allowed his voice to rise just enough that the family might catch his tone. If not his words, he commented on how the restaurant standards had changed, how the management perhaps no longer cared about maintaining exclusivity. He laughed a hollow laugh when the family ordered a bottle of wine that he assumed was the house red, confident that they must be taking the cheapest option. He shook his head theatrically, letting out small sighs of disbelief at their continued presence. Other patrons grew restless. A well-dressed couple at a neighboring table cast him cautious glances. An elderly gentleman frowned, and a woman across the room looked down, embarrassed by the scene unfolding. But the Williams family remained above it all. Daniel and Lauren focused on each other and on Ethan, who was delighted by the swirl of activity. They pointed discreetly to the chandeliers, whispered their admiration for the music, and guided their son in sampling dishes that he would remember fondly in years to come. Their refusal to engage or react frustrated Carter all the more. How dare they ignore his silent rebuke? Eventually, the tension in the room weighed so heavily that even the most seasoned members of the staff struggled to maintain their composure. One of the waiters, Elijah, a quiet man known for his discretion, approached Carter's table with lowered eyes. Elijah cleared his throat softly, presenting Carter's final bill on a silver tray. His manner was as polite as ever, but something was different. A note, folded and sealed, lay beside the printed receipt. Carter, frowning, raised an eyebrow at Elijah, who offered only a gentle inclination of his head and retreated. It was an unusual gesture. Normally, receipts were presented alone, without any personal correspondence. Intrigued and increasingly uneasy, Carter reached for the folded note. He hoped, perhaps, it was an apology from the management, an explanation of how such people had gained entrance. He imagined it might be some reassurance that the old standards still prevailed, that this unfortunate situation was a one-time lapse in judgment. With a faint smirk, he broke the seal and began to read. Within moments, the expression on Carter's face transformed. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth parted slightly, and he read the note again, more slowly this time, as if to confirm the words would not change. The note revealed that Daniel and Lauren Williams were no mere guests. They were, in fact, the owners of the Sterling Fork. They had purchased the establishment several years prior, after expanding a series of successful businesses. They were also known throughout the city for their philanthropy, funding educational programs, supporting local arts initiatives, and providing scholarships for underprivileged students. Their wealth and influence reached beyond these walls, quietly shaping the community for the better. The note concluded with a simple sentence: "We trust that all guests, regardless of appearance, receive the respect they deserve." Carter's hand trembled slightly. He looked up, scanning the room with new eyes. The family he had ridiculed and scorned this entire evening were not outsiders crashing his exclusive domain. They were its custodians, its lifeblood, the entire structure of his assumptions, which he had so confidently brandished, fell to pieces in that instant. He swallowed hard, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. The family was still seated there, enjoying their dessert, completely at ease. Ethan leaned forward, delightedly pointing at the delicate pastries arranged before him. Lauren nodded encouragingly, and Daniel smiled with fatherly pride. They were gracious and unruffled, the very picture of cultivated elegance. Suddenly, Carter realized that his earlier judgments were not only cruel, but utterly groundless. He had attacked them solely on the basis of his own prejudice, revealing himself to be not only arrogant, but ignorant. Carter's eyes darted about, noting how other diners watched him now, with expressions that ranged from pity to quiet condemnation. He imagined what they must be thinking, how small he appeared, how blinded by his own assumptions. He understood that he had exposed himself before this gathering of well-educated, discerning individuals. He felt naked under their scrutiny, as if every inch of his pride had been stripped away. He wanted to flee. He wanted to vanish beneath the linen tablecloth and melt into the polished floor. But what would running solve? He had committed a grave error, not just a social faux pas, but a moral failing. The Williams family, through their silence and composure, had shown him a dignity that put his own behavior to shame. Now he stood at a crossroads: remain the man he had been when he walked in tonight, or acknowledge the profound lesson that had just been administered. Carter reached for his water glass, struggling to steady himself. The world felt oddly tilted. His heart hammered in his ears. He knew that an apology was owed, nothing less than a full, humble admission of his wrongdoing. Could he muster the courage to approach them? Could he push past his pride and his fear of rejection? He stared at the note again, as if hoping for more instructions. It offered him no refuge, no gentle ending. It merely stated the truth. The rest, he realized with dawning acceptance, was up to him. For a long moment, Carter remained at his table, his hand still gripping the delicate note that had revealed the truth. He drew a shaky breath. The hum of conversation around him seemed to soften, as if granting him the space to decide his next action. There was no escaping the knot of shame in his chest, nor the prickling heat at the back of his neck. He knew exactly what he needed to do, even if it terrified him. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back with measured care, and navigated his way through the softly lit dining room. He passed diners who lowered their eyes, not in contempt so much as in pity and regret that such ugliness had been laid bare tonight, and pity for a man who had allowed prejudice to lead him astray. At last, Carter approached the Williams' table. Daniel and Lauren looked up when he arrived beside them. Their son, Ethan, tilted his head curiously. Carter struggled to form the first words, his throat tight and dry. How did one apologize for something so cruel and unwarranted? His voice, when it emerged, was a rasp that felt foreign to his ears. "I owe you an apology," he began quietly, his gaze moving between Lauren and Daniel before settling on Ethan's wide eyes. "My behavior this evening was shameful. I made assumptions about you because of how I saw the world, not how it really is, and I said and thought terrible things. I am so sorry." Lauren's face was calm, her expression thoughtful. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly, as though releasing tension he had long borne in silence. Ethan watched, perhaps sensing that something meaningful was unfolding, though he was too young to grasp all the implications. The family listened without interrupting, granting Carter the dignity of finishing his admission. I read the note," Carter continued, lifting the folded paper slightly as if in proof. "You own the sterling fork. You are not only guests here, but the very heart of this place. I had no idea. But ignorance is no excuse. I judged you without reason, without knowing anything about your character, your achievements, or your contributions. That was wrong. He paused, struggling to contain the tremor in his voice. I hope you can find it in yourselves to forgive my behavior, even if I don't deserve it. For a time, there was silence. Carter's heart hammered. He wondered if they might dismiss him, or worse, lash out with well-deserved contempt. Instead, Daniel leaned forward, his voice warm yet firm. Mr. Reynolds, we appreciate that you've come to speak with us. It takes courage to face one's mistakes. Lauren nodded, her tone gentle but direct. We understand that prejudice often thrives on ignorance and fear. We have encountered it before, and each time we hope that, given the chance, people might learn something valuable from these difficult moments. She reached out, taking her husband's hand. We built this restaurant not just as a business venture, but as part of our vision for a community rooted in respect and equality. Everyone who walks through these doors should feel welcome. We believe in that principle deeply. Carter lowered his head, humbled. You must think me so small-minded. Ethan, who had remained quiet, looked up at Carter with innocent candor. Are you feeling sorry now? He asked, as only a child could, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Carter felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Yes, he admitted. Very sorry. Lauren gently placed a hand on the table, not far from Carter's. We prefer to think that people can change, that mistakes can be valuable teachers, she said. We don't gain anything by holding on to anger. If you truly understand the harm done, then this could be a turning point for you. Daniel nodded in agreement. It's easy to judge others when you don't know their stories. Compassion and understanding require effort. We hope you'll consider this a lesson rather than a punishment. Carter felt gratitude surge within him, mingled with a sense of astonishment. They were offering him not just forgiveness, but an opportunity to grow. He wanted to say something worthy of their generosity, something that might show he wouldn't squander this chance. Thank you, he managed. I promise you, I will not forget what happened here tonight. I want to do better. Lauren smiled softly. If you truly wish to learn more about us, about the work we do in the community, we host regular gatherings, fundraisers, and educational programs. We welcome anyone willing to help. Perhaps you'd like to see what we've dedicated our lives to. Though the offer was unexpected, Carter felt it land deeply in his heart. Until this evening, he had prided himself on material success, on membership in an elite world where titles and possessions were the only currency that mattered. Now he understood that he had been living in a sterile bubble. He had never considered how much richer life could be when aligned with empathy and moral purpose. Meeting the Williams' eyes, he nodded. I would be honored, he said quietly. The next weeks passed like the unfolding of a new season in Carter's life. He received an invitation from the Williams family to attend a local community event sponsored by one of their charitable initiatives. At first, he worried that he would stand out as an intruder in their well-established circle. The man who had acted so unforgivably. But when he arrived on a crisp Saturday morning at a renovated community center on the city's west side, he found warmth and welcome at every turn. Tables were arranged with brochures highlighting scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, and cultural workshops funded by the Williams Family's Foundation. There were local volunteers greeting visitors with smiles, young people proudly displaying their artwork, and a group of musicians tuning their strings before a small performance. He recognized Lauren and Daniel near a makeshift stage, conversing with an elderly couple who ran a literacy program for disadvantaged youth. The atmosphere was alive with possibility, a stark contrast to the stiff exclusivity of the restaurants and clubs he once prized. When they spotted him, Lauren and Daniel beckoned him over. Carter approached hesitantly, but their smiles reassured him. Lauren introduced him to various community leaders, teachers who had helped shape the scholarship criteria, social workers who identified children in need of extra support, and small business owners who partnered with the foundation to provide vocational training. Daniel guided Carter through rooms where after-school tutoring sessions were held and presented him with stories of individual lives transformed by a helping hand rather than a dismissive sneer. Carter listened closely, his chest tightening at each account of perseverance and resilience. A young woman named Rosa, who had received a scholarship from the foundation, explained how their support allowed her to attend a prestigious university. She intended to return to her neighborhood after graduation and invest her new skills there. Another volunteer, named Martin, described how the job placement program helped dozens of adults regain stability and self-respect after long bouts of unemployment. Each story chipped away at the rigid hierarchy Carter had once taken for granted. He learned that true worth had little to do with appearances or material status. Instead, value shone through acts of kindness, understanding, and the willingness to lift others up. He realized that in the grand tapestry of humanity, each thread mattered equally, and helping weave those threads together was far more rewarding than hoarding wealth or looking down on those he misunderstood. As the sun rose higher, Carter found himself in conversation with Lauren at the edge of a small garden behind the community center. She spoke quietly, without reproach, about what had transpired the night he had insulted her family at the Sterling Fork. "We never wanted to single you out," Lauren said gently. "Our hope was that you would see us simply as fellow human beings. When people approach each other with respect, there is no need for confrontation. We gave you that note not out of spite, but out of faith that you might understand the lesson behind it." Carter nodded, his throat tight. "I feel as if I've awakened from a long sleep," he said. "All those years, I lived by a code that measured success only in status and wealth, never questioning my assumptions about others. Now I see how blind I've been, and I want to change." Lauren's gaze was kind. "Change is possible for all of us, Mr. Reynolds. It requires humility and sincerity, but the rewards are immeasurable. Look around you, this community center, these people coming together. You can be part of this, too." Daniel joined them, placing a gentle hand on Carter's shoulder. "We're not interested in punishing you for past mistakes. We care about building something better for the future. Your remorse and willingness to learn impress us. With your resources and influence, imagine what you can do if you channel them into causes that improve people's lives." Carter felt tears threaten again. He had never imagined that in humbling himself, he would find not humiliation, but acceptance. He thought back to his old world, where laughter often came at another's expense, where worth was determined by the cut of a suit or the price of a car. It felt so distant now. He wanted none of it. He wanted this warm, vibrant world, where people helped each other rise and where prejudice held no power. Over time, Carter committed himself to supporting the Williams family's initiatives. He attended more events, lent his business acumen to improve outreach, and invested financially in new programs that empowered youth from underprivileged neighborhoods. He learned to listen more than he spoke, to check his assumptions at the door, and to approach every encounter with an open heart. He discovered that empathy, once foreign to him, could become a guiding force. He savored the gratitude in a young student's eyes upon receiving a scholarship, the relief in a single mother's voice when she found stable employment, the pride in a volunteer's smile after a successful fundraiser. These small miracles of humanity nourished him in ways luxury restaurants never could. Months later, as he walked down a sunlit street, he reflected on how that evening at the Sterling Fork had changed him. He marveled at the family's grace, recalling how they had met his cruelty with understanding rather than anger. By extending their hand in friendship, they gave him the courage to confront his flaws and grow into a better man. In that growth, Carter finally understood what true wealth entailed. Not just having resources, but using them to lift others. Not just enjoying privileges, but ensuring they are shared. Not standing apart from people he once considered unworthy, but standing alongside them as equals. In this newfound understanding lay Carter's redemption. He was no longer trapped by prejudices. He had learned to value dignity, kindness, and the common human bond that unites us all. And so, as he carried forward, his steps were lighter, his perspective richer, and his heart more open than it had ever been before. Thank you for spending your time with us at Empathy Stories. We hope this moving account of self-discovery and transformed perspectives encourages you to challenge your own assumptions. True empathy can blossom in the most unexpected places, inspiring us to become kinder, more thoughtful individuals. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories that celebrate humanity's capacity for growth and remind us of the profound impact of understanding and love.